All right. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Herschel Mehta here of Mehta Ventures. I'm with my good friend Brendan Rogers over at 2 a.m. Ventures and Talent. So just wanted to bring some content for everybody, kind of talk about what we're seeing in the startup space, go over different avenues of ways to be productive during this downtime. So just want to rewind and kind of introduce ourselves. So I do early stage venture investing for our family here in the U.S. The family has a presence over in India, and we just started investing in the U.S. about 2 years ago. So Brendan and I, before we get started, kind of want to thank LinkedIn here because Brendan and I actually are friends through LinkedIn. So kind of a nice message to all you guys that it works. I think what we met about 7, 8 months ago. And since then, we've blossomed into a good friendship. He's actually come out to India and visited the entire family there, saw what we're doing with 100X. So these connections are real, that you make online, and they actually formulate into good friendships. Since then, Brendan and I have been sharing different startups we're seeing, and I've actually invested in two of Brendan's. Brendan's introduced me to two startups that are now portfolio companies. So I figured, this will be a good time to kind of understand what he's seeing as somebody that's so plugged in to the ecosystem, and for all of us, for all of our Indian viewers that will be joining. Brendan's been to Mumbai. He saw what the Indian startup ecosystem is. So I'm going to pick his brain on that as well. So maybe let's get started. Why don't Brendan, why don't you kind of give a background of yourself, and then let's jump right into what you're doing today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Uh, so my background is I moved to a small little town in 2011 called Palo Alto, and it's in Silicon Valley. And I started a online dating site that was acquired by a U.S. company called IAC Media in 2014, and then moved down to Los Angeles, where I started a my second business, which was called WAG, which is an on-demand dog walking marketplace to connect pet parents to dog walkers. And after 5 wonderful, hardworking years of WAG, I decided to, start the next chapter of my life, and I started angel investing and started the process of starting to raise my own pre-seed micro fund, and in parallel, starting a recruiting firm that works with early stage to late stage startups, placing amazing engineer talent, product talent, et cetera, from the IC level to executive level.
Awesome, awesome. So obviously, WAG kind of went through it was this crazy growth story, and one of the true kind of pillars of startups in the Southern California area. Maybe I think people would be curious on your relationship with the co-founders, how the team came about, what was the early days with WAG like?
Yeah, so my co-founders and I met actually in college back on the East Coast, and they were co-founders with myself for my first company. So we met in college and whatnot, and decided to move out to California. But the idea for WAG really came about when we lived next to a hiking trail in Los Angeles called Runyon Canyon, which is very well known in that area to go hiking and to go running and to bring your dogs. And every day we would see dog walkers and just people bringing their pets. And it was almost like the pet was an extension, of the family. It was like a child, and it was at that time where the gig economy was really taking off in the United States. You saw companies like Uber, Lyft, Instacart, Handy, really start getting a lot of traction where these companies could, have contractors and hire people as contractors to make extra money as, side hustles and stuff like that. And there was this entry into the market with the pet space where there wasn't anybody really working on this on-demand pet service business, and we decided to launch essentially the Uber of dog walking. in 2014, where we would essentially connect pet parents to dog walkers, and you could see your dog walking on a live GPS map on your phone, and you would have full transparency over where your dog was during the walk. And the idea really came about when we saw that the gig economy was really taking off, but more so that people in LA, like everybody has pets in LA. It's very hot in LA. There's a lot of traffic in LA. So the dogs are stuck inside most of the day. And we wanted to provide that freedom for pet parents. And on the competitor side, you know, dog walking the it wasn't owned by any specific, big retailer or big tech company. It was essentially just like a mom and pop. So think of it as like Brendan's dog walking service or Herschel's dog walking service. There wasn't any like market leader in the space. So we knew that there was an opportunity to enter that space and, quickly gain traction. So that's kind of how it started. And we really thought that dog walking was a great place to get into the pet parent's home because if we knew that if we could provide an amazing service day in and day out, that we could essentially own the whole pet service experience with that customer. So then we can extend the lifetime value of that customer, as we launch more services.
Yeah, it's smart, right? It kind of starts out as something so simple as, providing a service that's very obvious, but at the same time, the vision gets grand. So maybe what I've noticed a lot of entrepreneurs is they kind of start with these grandiose ideas, and I think that focusing in on one thing in particular and doing that one thing really well will open up lifetime value that's invaluable for any company. So how did you guys pitch it? Like, what was getting the first check like? Tell us about the early days, because stuff like this, it doesn't happen overnight. So what was the kind of critical mass? How did you get the name out there? If there are all these mom and pop places that are putting up flyers on on telephone poles, like what did you do differently? Did you do the same thing? What was that like?
Yeah. So, the first part of the question on the investor side, well, first and foremost, we had some friends and family, start giving us just a little bit of money to start this. But our initial investors were actually folks that just were in the, we reached out to them in the tech space in LA, and they just fundamentally believed in the pet space, and they believed in the mission and the core values of the business. But the pitch was, we wanted to be the button on your phone for your pet. So when you think of your pet, you click the wag icon on the phone, and you have the opportunity to have your pet serviced in all aspects of owning the life cycle of a pet. So for an example, we wanted to walk your dog. We wanted to provide sitting and boarding. We wanted to provide, um, you know, dog food delivery. We wanted to have your pet medical records within the app. But that was the overall vision, is to really own the whole life cycle of the pet. So we pitched that, and the kind of what I mentioned earlier is that we pitched, we are going to be the number one dog walking company in the world, and we're going to be able to come into your house every single day when you're there or not. We're going to build that trustworthy, safe product. And when you have built that trust with the customers and they keep using us day in and day out, we know that we can then launch other services later down the road to extend lifetime value and whatnot. So the pitch was to really own, the dog walking space and be the best at dog walking, and then venture off into extending into other services and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's unique, and I think founders that have these grand visions, once again, kind of that primary focus of owning a particular market and then unlocking channels. It should be obvious to the investor. So like you said at the beginning, once you get the dog, it'll unlock every aspect of the dog. And when you were pitching these investors, it must be crazy numbers you guys are showing in terms of how much Americans spend on their dogs, like how much time they spend, like this, the actual value of actual monetary value you can kind of get just from servicing a dog in all different facets must have been huge. So then an investor will sit here think like, well, if they scale this correctly, and they're in every single dog owner's home and they're servicing all aspects of the dog through partnerships and things like that, this is easily $1 billion opportunity, and which would make it easy. So it in retrospect, you sit there and you think, well, a dog walking app, but then now when you look at it, it's so much more that you can actually unlock. So I think founders, and I'm sure you'd agree, these type of simple solutions leading to longer LTV is crucial. So I think everybody's curious on how what are some growth hacks you guys had? How did you look at kind of company culture? What were the first 2-3 years like of building something that is now pretty much a mainstay out here?
Yeah, I mean, so the first couple of years, the first year of WAG was we did everything non-scalable, like you wouldn't believe. A lot of our software was very manual. A lot of our processes of bringing on onboarding the dog walkers was very manual. Um, it was a very grueling couple of years, and obviously with every startup you have to grind and it was, I love to tell the stories because there isn't an amount of money that could have given me that experience, and I'm very grateful and for that experience. But in terms of the growth hacking that we did, so first and foremost, with a two-sided marketplace, um, typically, on the supply side, it can be very costly and it can be very hard to get people to want to, do your service if it's not something that's incentivizing you, either from a financial perspective or just in general, the work is kind of robotic or boring. So as you see with companies like Uber and Lyft, they have huge driver acquisition costs. With WAG, everybody loves puppies, everybody loves dogs, and everybody loves going outside and walking and getting exercise and getting sun. So we had this awesome supply of people that were like, oh my God, I get to go and walk dogs and get paid for it. Like, this is crazy. So we realized that we had all this inbound of supply that was affordable. So it's like, well, why can't we use the supply to market our product? Like, why can't the supply go out in the field and close clients or close, pet parents? And what we did in the early days is we launched in LA, we gave referral codes to our dog walkers in Los Angeles, and they would go to dog parks, they would go to pet stores, they would just be where dog owners are, and they would have referral codes, and every time they would sign up a new customer, they would get compensated for that. So we utilized our supply of passionate, mission driven dog walkers to get us more customers. um, and what was great for the dog walkers is that they were extremely incentivized, because when they signed up new pet parents, that pet parent would then book that dog walker. So essentially, the dog walker is getting more and more business, and they're expanding their dog walking schedules and whatnot. And the one thing about you know WAG specifically is that obviously dogs go to the bathroom multiple times a day, blah, blah, blah. Frequency and retention is extremely high. And we have these two different channels of scheduling where you could have a one-off walk where you would do one dog walk, you would book one individual walk at a time, or you would set up a recurring schedule. So we had walkers that would have these recurring schedules where every single day they had 5 or 6 clients, and it was just on repeat. And those were some of the early hacks to get more customers. Some other growth hacks that we did. One thing that worked really well with us was local press. We didn't focus on a lot of paid marketing at first. We did a lot of local news channels, local press, and we hustled to get into those publications. We emailed, we used our network, we got rejected. But we still got in. But the local news is still very trustworthy. And when you take care of we call them fur babies. When you take care of a fur baby, you like that is part of the family. So like you need to build so much trust and you need to provide such a safe platform that local news really helped us with that. And that was a really good way to grow. And I would say the third thing, the growth hack that we did was we incorporated something called like the first walk was free. So basically we'd let you try the service for free for no cost. And at first, you have to you give a service away for free. You got to pay someone in a two-sided marketplace. So we did the walks at first to get these customers to do their first walk and for free, and they were like, "Oh my god, I love this service!" And eventually we started getting more customers, and we had uh, this marketing initiative, and it has grown with the company where the first walk is free. So that was kind of a growth path to get people in the funnel.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Just because it's like, as founders, you're going to do some things that are not scalable, right? Like you have to at the beginning, you have to, like you said, grind until you break through. And then that makes a lot of sense. Actually doing the walks yourself, even though you have a demand, it's like, well, we can't really pay somebody to do this. Otherwise we'll just burn our friends and family money or the first angel's money. We're going to have to put in the time ourselves. Just curious on some of the rejections you guys got. I mean, there must have been so many investors saying this isn't going to work. What was some of the negative feedback you got at the beginning?
Yeah, so we had a lot of, I think the majority of the rejections were actually in Los Angeles, but we raised our first seed round from a fund up in San Francisco. A lot of the rejections were around, they couldn't see past dog walking. A lot of investors thought this was just a lifestyle business. This wasn't a venture backed business. You won't be able to scale this in 200 cities. You won't be able to get past dog walking. Dog walking historically, the US is around $1 to $2 billion in annual revenue. A lot of investors were not receptive to that because they thought that it just wasn't a big enough business. That was the initial reactions, and then also one thing that we did differently that separated us from everybody else in the space, even the mom and pops, was, we provided a WAG lockbox, which is essentially a box you put on your front door and you put your key in the lockbox and there's a code. So you didn't have to be home to use the WAG service, and that separated us from everyone. And a lot of investors were like, well, people are not going to let you into their house, when they're not home. And there's so much liability. People are going to steal things. Animals are going to get, hurt. So there's a lot of liability issues too around it. But, just like with anything, you have to just kind of fight through everything and fight through the noise. And one thing that we did was, in our pitch, was that like we didn't focus on anything else but just dog walking. We just focused on dog walking. We are going to be the number one dog walking company in the whole world. We are going to do millions of dog walks, and we are going to scale dog walking so everybody in the world that has a pet will use WAG. And we stuck with that. We didn't go into these investor meetings saying, "Oh, next year we're going to go do mobile grooming and buy 100 vans." We're not, we're going to go into uh, pet pharmacies and build pet pharmacies and stuff. It was just dog walking. We stayed in our lane. We had our specific value prop. We built the brand around dog walking. Everybody knew WAG was dog walking, and everything was dog walking. And um, I think that really helped us with some investors because they instantly got it. And you also, as an investor, you have to believe and you have to take that risk. And we had a lot of people that were just like, yeah, it's just not a big enough business for me. But you fight through that and you try to find people that are extremely value add from day one. And eventually, as you keep believing, giving out positive energy, and keep fighting and keep working towards it, like people will people will say yes for sure.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. It's you have to pitch 50 to 100 investors to get one person to just even buy in. It's one of these things you can't stop. I've seen so many startups that I've passed on, and a year later, they'll ping me with kind of their updates, and I'm in shock and awe of how much they've grown, how the complete nature of what they're doing became so obvious. And it's one of these things as investors, obviously with hindsight, you look and you're like, man, how did I miss this, or why didn't I think like this at that time? But the founders should have that belief. The founders should know or have that kind of self determination that I don't need the funding to do this. I don't need everybody to tell me this is a fantastic idea. I just need to do it. And I see it, right? Like I would say probably out of, hundreds of deals I see, one will get an investment from me. And so, it's one of these things where, that doesn't mean that all the ones I invest in are going to do well. And it doesn't mean that all of the, all of the ones that I said no to fail. I see, quite a lot. I've been noticing that some of these startups that I just didn't get a year later, it's mind blowing how much they've grown. And so if you do get rejected, kind of the lesson here is that, like, you have to keep going. You can't stop. Have that belief in what you're doing. You don't need validation from everybody. Not everybody's going to believe in what you're doing. Not everybody's going to get it. But if you believe, if you work hard, if you produce value, it'll happen. So I think we're on similar pages there. Just curious now on what's going on with 2AM and kind of what you're seeing in this new realm and what are you building nowadays?
Yeah, so I started a firm called 2AM Talent, 2AM Ventures, and what that is then like to tell why I name it 2AM. I think that some people may not understand or know, but some of the best, if not the best, angel investors, the best employees, you know, are up all hours of the night. You can call them up; they're available if they need anything. They're on. They believe in the business. They believe in the values, the mission. So that's the name behind the firm. But what I'm up to is, I am angel investing at the moment. I'm uh, in the process of raising a very small pre-seed micro fund. But I would probably say probably about 60% of my time is spent working with early stage companies to late stage companies on the West Coast and East Coast of the United States. From a startup perspective, just hiring awesome talent and just also working, with founders as well on the kind of the current climate that we're going through right now, and that's kind of how I spend my time. I think that there's a lot of over the last month, it's just been kind of obviously a very weird but also upsetting time. But I think that from a founder perspective, there's a lot of uncertainty, but also confusion. So I've been able to help a lot of founders out and working with founders from that perspective. So that's currently what I'm up to. Seeing a lot of really cool deals, talking to a lot of founders about their companies, and a lot of founders are thinking about either pivoting or maybe not launching right now, maybe not raising capital at the moment. So just kind of just having all those types of conversations and just kind of being inside most of the day. That's pretty much where I spend my time right now. But super excited about the firm and the talent firm that I launched. I have some great people that are working with me, and just really looking forward to scaling it. And super passionate about the chapter that I'm on now in my life. I went 5 years at WAG where it was blood, sweat, and tears. There wasn't any time for anything else. It was just WAG. I learned a lot. Super grateful for every single person I met there, and it was an experience of a lifetime. But very fortunate and grateful now that I get to really take my lessons and experience that I learned and apply it to, what I'm doing now, and also like what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's odd, right? Like as somebody that's in startups or investing in startups, the last 5 6 weeks here in the U.S. has have been tremendously busy. I mean, people are working on innovative, crazy things, and it's the right time. If you have experience, if you have time to be there for founders, I'm sure a lot of them are leaning on you for your advice, not only recruiting but also culture. Tell me about what what you like to see in a startup's culture, how to treat your employees right, how to treat your co-founders right, how to set expectations, how to set boundaries, but also how to drive results. What are your thoughts on company culture and how can companies improve them?
Yeah, so like I think so I'm a big culture person. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I write a lot of posts around culture, and I think that with WAG specifically, the culture at first it was good. It was a good culture in the beginning, and then it got really bad because we didn't know how to scale culture with the growth that we were experiencing, and we were making sure that the wheels weren't falling off the bus because we were growing so fast. Um, so I had an opportunity to be in a culture that was good, and then really bad, and then really good, and then amazing. And some of the things that I look for in company culture, specifically when implementing a culture or scaling a culture, or identifying if the culture is good or not, is really seeing like employees, just understanding like the motivation and seeing if these folks are motivated and passionate and driven. And the way that I, like to see company culture kind of grow is through like autonomy, grow through transparency, growing, growing through being aligned with one another. And what we implemented at WAG was, you know, once we grew and we implemented some hiring changes on the executive level, um, for the longest time, we didn't have a transparent culture. And I think that's one of the most important things with culture is you need to have transparency. And that's with your employees, and that's with your direct reports, and that's with your managers, whatever the case may be. And, at WAG, we didn't have transparency. We didn't know, like a lot of the people there like didn't know like what the roadmap was, and didn't understand what the wins were and what the losses were. It's just there wasn't an alignment. But being, once we implemented a transparent culture where we did have weekly all hands, we did kind of go through our wins and our losses and our roadmap and our milestones and what our KPIs were. People started to really like, be behind it, and really be passionate about it. And that's what I look for. And I think that on like a micro level, really even with your co-founders is like having one-on-ones, weekly one-on-ones, having those meetings, checking in to see, how your co-founder is doing, checking in to see how your direct report is doing. Um, you know, talk through things, ask questions. And I think that transparency and being on the same page is probably one or two pillars that I think really drives culture. But also like from a top down approach, you want to have leaders that are like bought in by the mission and the core values of the company. People at WAG that worked at WAG and that still work at WAG are extremely passionate about pets. They love pets, and they want to help people that own pets out. And that really helped drive the culture because people wanted to be there. Um, so that's what I look. I look for like really just making sure that you're transparent and aligned with your employees and checking in with employees. And I don't think you can buy culture. I don't think you can just put in a bunch of free chips and soda and kegs and like be like, oh, we're a startup now, like let's have good company culture. It really stems from like the top down, but also the bottom up of like how people believe in the business, and if are passionate. They do believe in the core values. Um, so those are just some little quick tips that I really, look for and stuff. And also like just also autonomy. Like I think that we're in a world now where distributed remote teams is acceptable, and I don't think you need to be breathing down people's necks every hour of every day. And I think that having this autonomy culture where like if you believe and you are transparent and you trust your employee and they trust you or your co-founder, that you both are on the same page where you know that that person's going to execute no matter where they are in the world, no matter what time of the day that they're in. I think that really drives productivity and culture.
Yeah, yeah, I think that you're spot on. I think this COVID situation is going to bring a lot more acceptance to remote work. At the same time, empower people to trust in their employees and trust in their coworkers and co-founders to execute. One thing that kind of when your back's on the wall, you're forced in these circumstances. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, with a lot of these startups that had office spaces and now were probably just as productive during these last 5 weeks. Are they going to go back to those spaces, or are they going to say, you know what, this isn't necessary. We can do just as good of a job without rent anymore. So, interesting stuff. So, as you're kind of growing this new business, are you going to look to work directly with startups? What kind of engagement are you trying to do? How do you look at the current landscape, and are people hiring?
Yeah. So, in terms of my engagement with startups, I think like first and foremost, my immediate value add is obviously people, recruiting culture, operations and whatnot. So those are like the immediate pillars that when I engage with founders in terms of like value add from day one. But in terms of like our startups hiring, to be transparent, no, they're not. I think a lot of the startups, there's a lot of startups that have froze hiring, and then there's just a lot of startups that realize that they're either bloated in some departments and they don't need to keep hiring folks, and then also they realize that cash is king and they want to limit the burn. So like based on our product roadmap and based on what we have to execute on, these are the people that we have, and these are the people that are going to execute on it, and we can't hire more people. I'm seeing a lot of companies saying to themselves, we can't hire more people. We don't want to risk the fact of running out of money, and we don't know, the funding landscape right now is all over the place. So companies are not hiring. I think that there's a small subgroup of companies that are hiring, but those are companies that can scale with pandemics and can scale with coronavirus and pandemics to come. And an example of that is, for an example, esports. You're seeing esports right now, just given how people are inside and whatnot, there's esports companies that are, up and to the right from a revenue perspective, daily active user, MAU perspective. Those companies are hiring. You're also seeing companies like Instacart in the United States that are getting huge demands of people wanting their groceries delivered because they're not leaving their house. I think companies that are like more so growing with this pandemic are hiring. And then also there's another group of like the Facebooks of the world, the Asanas, the Googles. I think that they're just so cash heavy that they need to keep hiring. But that's what I'm seeing. But a lot of startups, probably 85 to 90% of startups that I've seen, even globally too, are just, and also startups that are trying to enter new markets internationally and whatnot, have all paused hiring, if not let people go. And it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also a good time to start a business, to be a founder, which is unique, right? It's if you're not a technical founder, this is a phenomenal time to find a CTO. This is like there's so much talent that probably got cut from some of these, whether it's like a scooter company or whether it's, some kind of restaurant tech. Right now, this is like perfect time to pick somebody up that's looking for a new project. And I think that a lot of these devs are going to want to take chances. They're not going to take things for granted. So it's a phenomenal time. So just some kind of interesting stuff. We'll kind of go rapid fire here. I was curious, you for some of the audience, which will be in India. What was your experience like coming out to Mumbai and kind of seeing the 100x demo day? What would you think of it? Was that your first time? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so it was my first time in India, and just a little bit of backstory is it was in December. I was, you know, in terms of recruiting, once you get past Thanksgiving in the States, recruiting sort of is a lull until after the new year because people are with their family. There's so many holidays, blah blah blah. So I was in this place where I was just like, I have holiday plans, and like I just kind of felt like there wasn't that much going on. So I got an email from Herschel saying, hey, if you want to come to India for 100x demo day, you're more than welcome to come. And I was like, I fell out of my seat. I was like this would be completely awesome. Like, this is mind blowing. This is something that, bucket list. I my whole life I've been wishing to go to that part of the world. And it was my first time in India, and I've done a lot of research on Indian startups and just like the whole ecosystem, and I think it's fascinating. And as WAG being or was a Vision Fund One portfolio company, there's also a lot of Indian startups in the portfolio as well too. So just like very aware of the startup scene and whatnot. So I was like, you know what, like if I'm gonna do this, this is like I'm gonna do this now. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And when I came to India, I was blown away by, first of all, how beautiful India is and how nice everybody was and how I was treated, with respect. And I just felt like, I felt like I was actually like, with my friends. It was awesome. It was an unbelievable experience. But when I went to 100x, the demo day, I was completely blown away by the companies, that the traction that these companies had in such a short amount of time. Like, I think I told Sanjay there when I met him for the first time, I literally thought I was in Palo Alto. I was like, this is Silicon Valley. Like, if I'm gonna walk outside, I'm gonna be in Palo Alto right now. And I was just very impressed with the founders. I was impressed with the traction. It was awesome. I had a wonderful experience. I actually wish I could have stayed longer. And I think next time I will for sure stay longer, experiencing more cities as well in India. But the one thing that really stood out to me too when I spoke with founders in India is I felt, as you can see through this interview, I'm very passionate. I just love talking about startups. And when I spoke with a lot of the founders there, I just felt passion. I had the hair sticking up on the back of my neck that, like, the how bad that everybody wanted to like just keep grinding and being successful and like just keep like working and growing, as a business. And you know what, like, you don't really get that in like places in the United States. Like, you go to Silicon Valley and everyone's all like, on like their high horse, like this is Silicon Valley. But like in India, I felt like people it was just, I just felt magical. Like, it felt so cool. And like, I probably told this story to like 20 people, just what I'm saying now. But it was an awesome experience.
Yeah.
It was super cool. Like, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no, we were happy to have you. Part of it may have been the jet lag. There's a 13-hour time difference, but we'll leave it to the magic,
Yeah.
the magic of Mumbai. So curious now, really quick, what are, just give me 2 or 3 traits you want to see in founders, from an investor perspective, from a potential co-founder perspective, from somebody you want to recruit for?
Yeah, so like I would say like for me it's the founders, solo founder or more so like if there is co-founders, like just having that team chemistry because like pre-seed day one, like you're these are the people that it's a family. Like this is what you're gonna go through the biggest of ups and the lowest of lows. And like I look for founders if like, are these the founders that like if this idea is not the idea, they're gonna be able to get up and execute on something else. So I really look for team chemistry. I really look for, you know, how like, how passionate the space that they're building in or and stuff like that. And it's hard to explain, but like you get that feeling when you speak to someone and you're just like, there's something about this team where like no matter what gets thrown in their face, like they're gonna figure it out. They're gonna do something. Like it may not be dog walking, but it may be this. You know what I mean? Like there's just something. So I really look for team chemistry. And then what was the second question?
Just what give me two traits that you're looking for. What are the traits that indicate that this founder or this team will be successful? What are some habits?
I would say like persistence. I think persistence is huge. I think that like just like the team chemistry, like can they work well together? Can these people work well together? I think like also I think being fearless is something that like you can't have any doubt of like I think of it as like can you go up to people and tell people about your product and not be and be fearless about it? And
Good.
like
Shameless.
with WAG, like we every time we saw somebody with a dog, run up to them instantly. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Have you heard about WAG? This is what WAG is. Blah 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 blah. Not as crazy as that, but like having the tenacity and having the being fearless, where like no matter what happens, no matter like what these people say, no matter if they laugh me out the room, no matter if they think this is the worst idea on planet Earth, I'm gonna still go up to these people and I'm still gonna pitch them my product and I'm still gonna try to get them on my platform. And it's I just look for like traits where and you can't really like it's almost like a gut feeling because I've been through that. Like so like I know I know a little bit like how to what to look for in from that perspective. And those are a couple of the traits that I'm just like, okay, I think this could be a team that will do well for sure.
Yeah. So I'll tell an interesting story now. You had sent me one deal, a deal called Radiate, that we invested in. So these guys, they have a social network around large gatherings, and I wasn't really that interested in the space, but part of our thesis here at Meta Ventures is investing in people. After an hour conversation with the founder, I was like enamored. And the story he told me was, so they have a social network, right? So how do you get critical mass on a social network? That was one of my questions. I've tried to build a social network. I failed miserably. So I asked him, and this was one of the most creative stories I've heard. He told me that there was this festival called Holy Ship. Holy Ship is a cruise that leaves from Miami. It's like thousands of people, and it's just a big dance party for 4 days. The issue is with cruises, you can't connect to Wi-Fi. It's very expensive. They can charge whatever they want, right? $50, $100 for a single day of connection. So these guys snuck on a bunch of routers and modems and created a private internet connection and started giving communication tools out to people on the cruise saying, hey, communicate with your friends through Radiate. And they were able to get thousands of users just in one single festival. And so I hear a story like that, and I'm like, that is brilliant. And the founder spent about 30 minutes going over him and his co-founder's relationship, how they've known each other for 10 plus years. They fenced together, and how one of the co-founders is introverted and the CEO was extroverted, and how they got into this space was the introverted co-founder said, I need friends. And the extroverted founder took him to one of these festivals, and the lights turned on. So, you hear these stories, you hear these relationships, and it becomes clear that, something special is brewing. And 4 days after the pitch, I gave him a commitment. So,
Nice.
it's crazy how you can see it. Investors can see it. It's one of these things that permeate through founders when they have that drive, when they have those relationships, when they have these big visions. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, how can you keep things fun at a company? What are your thoughts, like really quickly, on how do you execute and keep things light, keep things humorous? What are some of the tricks that founders can do to keep that culture fast moving at the same time enjoyable?
Yeah, I think like that's a tough question. I would say like on on a macro level, really celebrate like the highs and lows. So like I'm a big believer of like, you know, if you get a win, celebrate it, whatever that celebration is. And then if there's a low, like really hunker down, work together and get through it. So I'm like a big believer of like celebrating highs. I would say like, yeah, to just like to keep things light, like, you know, just I would say like one thing that I didn't do was I didn't really have balance in the early days of WAG. I really just like work 24/7, and I think that um you also need a break. You need to have balance and stuff like that. So I would suggest like keeping things light is maybe like you and your co-founders kind of take a step back for a little bit and kind of like do something that you know you guys or whoever likes to do, whether if it's like going for walks or like going out to get something to eat, or maybe like if you guys like like playing a sport, just kind of like get out and like kind of like take yourself away from the work, and then kind of jump back into it. I think that that's what I recommend. That's a really tough question. Yeah, I think that's just it gives you balance. I think balance is key, and I did not have balance during WAG for sure.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Coming from the public accounting world, I can honestly say that in an industry that's purely based on human capital, a balance is very hard to find, especially in high octane type jobs. And startups have to be high octane. So finding that balance, differentiating yourself, retaining talent, these are all things that leaders should think about. And that's another thing that I've kind of been thinking about recently is when I look at founders, I just don't think of how big is the market size, how big is the problem that they're solving, does it align with what we think where the world is heading. It's also about, can this person lead? I think leadership skills are so undervalued and overlooked. Now I'm starting to look at companies, and one of my first thoughts is, would I work for this person? And so, kind of conceptualizing that. Now, if you were to go work with somebody or partner with somebody, give me one trait that you would want them to kind of show. What's something that somebody can do to win you over?
Um, I would say like just being on the same page with like I will first of all I like I mentioned earlier like you got to be passionate, you got to be motivated, but that's just like general stuff. I would say like you have to like want to win, and for me that's like someone that just like will like at all costs they do whatever it takes to win, because this is how I put food on my table, this is my life, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to the next level. That's what I look for. I look for people that are like, I would look for someone that's like, we're going to do this, and we are going to give it every single ounce of energy that we have, and we are going to win, and we are going to be the greatest and the best at this.
Yeah, no, that
What I would
competitive
look for.
that
Yeah.
that competitive nature, that's like so crucial. Like, it doesn't work if you're kind of relaxed. You have to be a killer. I'm with you on that. Kind of one last thing now. Um, in this current climate, what would be your one tip to founders that are thinking of potentially pivoting or thinking about kind of rebranding or recapitalizing, give us one tidbit of what you're seeing with the countless founders you're working with.
Well, first of all, I think that a lot of founders should be, if they are going through things of pivoting or recap or whatever the case may be, just know that everybody's going through this. It's not just you. And I think that's first and foremost. Like, this is a world problem. It's not a you problem. But I would say, like, one tip that I would say and recommend is, like, really, if you are pivoting or if you are rebranding or whatever the case may be, like, that's okay. But I would, like, figure out, like, what like, where do you want to be in, like, 6 to 12 months, and what's your roadmap, and, like, what does that look like? And, like, if your business is not getting traction, if your business is not getting funding, like, fail fast and move forward, and that's okay. And that's totally okay, because, like, you're gonna have 30 ideas before you hit the or do something that, like, really works. That would be my tip, is, like, if it's not working, move on, and just, like, don't be like as blunt as it sounds, like like you shouldn't give a shit. Like, just move forward, like, move on and go on to the next thing, because, like, the world's not going to stop. That would be my tip. And what I'm seeing is, like, there's a lot of businesses right now that, like I said earlier, like, just uncertain, like, what's going to happen. Should I raise money? Should I not raise money? And it's like, my advice to you is, given the current landscape that we're in, can you get traction? Are people going to be using your product? And if not, I would pivot into a product or a business where people can still utilize during these crazy times, because this may not be the only pandemic that we go through. You know what I mean? So I would think through, like, does this business make sense in a time like this, and what happens next year if something else comes up? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
um
no, totally. I mean, this, people throw around the world that the word the new normal. This is very real, and so things will be different. So as we kind of approach, you know, getting near the end of this pandemic, there isn't, there's the certainty that this doesn't happen again. It's kind of it feels like, to me, it feels like as if we discovered aliens. Like, like once we just, oh, aliens exist, like maybe, now it's something where we start thinking that, the realm of possibility is limitless. So, we things will be different, and I think that it's in the back of my mind at every startup I look at. Is this pandemic proof? And
yeah.
it's such a odd thing. It's happened so quick, but and I think investor sentiment is real, and I think founder sentiment will slowly start to kind of come back. Yeah, so I guess get traction, show that your product works, man. So
And also, like, I was gonna say, like we're clearly going into, I don't know if you call this America 2.0, but this is for sure the new norm. And, like, you're either on the ship or you're off the ship. And, like, the people that are on the ship that innovate and kind of and think of new businesses during this crazy time, and how you're seeing so many people on video now, you're seeing so many people do get-togethers and all these stuff on videos. Like, there's new ways of, like, this is a unbelievable time to start a business, because there's people that are unfortunately out of work that are looking for new projects and ideas to work on. People are not they're not transporting, or they're not traveling that much. Like, people are inside, like, there's more eyeballs now. Like, I think this is an amazing time to start a business. And if you're on the ship of the new norm and you think about, how can I create a business that can, like, work in this new world, um, I think that you have, like, a lot of opportunity for sure.
yeah, and it's unique too. I think that this is a time when there's actually a lot of developer talent, and It's not expensive. Like I remember when I was doing my startup in 2014, it was hard to find a developer. It was hard to find somebody that could deliver on things, that knew what, how to code in Swift and iOS. And now it's like, it feels like the ball has gone into a pure entrepreneur's court where you can find developers. It's easier than ever to build software. There's no code tools out there. This is the time to be creative. This is the time to pick up on different business models, be unique, solve problems, and the technicalities of things shouldn't be holding back entrepreneurs. There's plenty of talent out there. I'm sure you've got a huge Rolodex, of engineers, and it's this is like perfect time. So I totally agree with you. And as things continue, we're consistently looking at deals. We're still investing. I know you are too. I know you're still looking at deals. You're still looking at startups. Startups always need outside perspectives and advice. And I would recommend no one other than yourself to kind of steer that ship, just because one last thing I do want to touch base on is the power of networking. I think that you do a good job of kind of this brand building, of speaking on LinkedIn, of posting. So just talk about kind of, obviously we met through this platform, but just talk about what LinkedIn means to you, and how founders should be utilizing it.
Yeah, so I think LinkedIn just is right now is a unbelievable time to build your personal brand, not just for the short term, but for the long term. And I use LinkedIn as a platform to tell my stories and to share what I'm thinking and what I'm up to. But it is for me, I use the platform to connect with like-minded people, and I personally believe that throughout your life, you should always be building your personal brand. You should always be growing. You should always be meeting new people. You should always be, I always think of it as like every time you meet someone you're interviewing, um, there's an opportunity now with LinkedIn and how so many people are on it, and how there's a lot of opportunity to grow on LinkedIn and really grow your presence, that the time is now to really network and be a thought leader in your space. What LinkedIn, I feel like for me is, it gives me the opportunity to tell my stories that I've had and share what's on my mind, and connect with people that are all over the world. If I never met Herschel on LinkedIn, I would have probably would have been able to go to India probably for a long time or whatnot. And um, a lot of my relationships that have developed, over the last year and a half, have been through LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody, from a if you're starting a business or not, to really consider, building your personal brand on LinkedIn. And just like, a quick tip on building your personal brand is, you really want to, have 2 or 3 pillars that you want to be a thought leader in that space, and post content around those pillars, and keep posting content and interact with people that are aligned with those pillars. And for me, my pillars are recruiting, startups, and culture. And I always post about that. And I connect with a lot of founders and recruiters and folks in HR. And that's how I want to be looked at, as a thought leader in that space. So I encourage everybody to for sure build their brand on LinkedIn, and keep reaching out, and keep providing valuable content, because the ROI will pay off at some point.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And just deepest thanks, from myself and from my family, for taking the time. I'm sure that a lot of the viewers now, and the viewers later, they'll pick up on tidbits. And appreciate you sharing these stories, especially everybody wants to be a part of something like WAG, and so kind of giving insights. It's tremendous, because you can pick specific experiences and mirror what you want to accomplish with that kind of stuff. So really appreciate it. I'm sure all the viewers do too, and we'll be in touch, and thanks for everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was, an absolute blast. Thank you.
Cool, Brendan. See ya.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.